All right, we're beginning tape 20, and what we'll be talking about are the different types of democracy. There's actually two different types of democracy. There is the first one, which is direct democracy, also called pure and participatory. And when you think about this, what you think about are states, countries, where the people vote for everything. Okay? There is no representation. It's the people deciding things. I came from a state, California, where a citizen could actually write a law, go around, get enough signatures on it to get it on the ballot. Then once it's on the ballot, the people of the state actually vote for it. That's an example of direct democracy. We don't have that here in Texas, okay? We don't have direct democracy. It's also called pure and participatory. The other kind of voting or democracy, is indirect democracy. And this has a couple of other names. This would be representative democracy, or also a republic. Republican, the name of the party, actually comes back to this type of democracy, an indirect democracy. And what that is where the people elect representatives, and then the representatives make all the decisions. Okay? So, this is pretty easy stuff. Okay? You have direct democracy where the people make all the decisions, and you have indirect democracy where the people elect representatives and the representatives make all the decisions. Okay? Nothing terribly complicated here. Let me just give you a couple of examples. C-SPAN television, I once was watching it late at night, I couldn't sleep, and they were showing a town hall meeting in a little village in New England, one of those states up there. And it was very simple. It was an example of direct democracy. The town got together and they were debating the hot issue in the town. Do they put in their first stoplight? They have a stop sign in their main street, but they don't have a stop light. So, should they put in a stop light? So, the whole town got together one evening and they debated it out, and they talked about how the bill is going to be paid for the light regarding the electricity, what hours it's going to work, is there going to be tickets that are given in off hours, how long will it take to go from red to yellow to green, all that kind of stuff. And then they voted to put it in. That's an example of direct democracy. Okay? Turns out that the states that have legalized marijuana, for the most part, are states where there's a form of direct democracy, where the people write the law, the potential law, get it on the ballot, and then the voters vote on it. In states where the legislature votes, like here in Texas, in other words, representative democracy, there's a lot less places that allow marijuana. And that's a really interesting thing. It seems like the people want it, but our representatives don't necessarily want it. Okay? Now, with this in mind, the difference between direct and indirect, just keep that in mind. The next thing to know is a very simple question, and it has to do with this word right there. Representative. What is a representative? Yeah, I know. It's you elect someone and then they go and they represent you in the legislature. So like city council, school board, the state, Texas Senate, the Texas House of Representatives, the United States Congress, the United States Senate. Those are all examples of representative democracy. Also, let's be honest, a president is a representative. He or she represents us. Okay? So, what is a representative? And that's actually not a simple question. And I want to give you 3 possible answers. Okay? So, the first type of representative is called a delegate. D-E-L-E-G-A-T-E. A delegate. A delegate is someone who, it turns out, votes exactly the way the people tell them to vote. Okay? Typically, a delegate is a representative who just got elected. Okay? First time in office, they're just delighted to be there, and they are going to represent the people exactly as the people want to be represented. Okay? That's a delegate. All right. My favorite quote about a representative was from a Baptist pastor. And the Baptist pastor said, this was a letter that he wrote to his representative. We didn't send you to Washington to make intelligent decisions. We sent you to represent us. Get that? A delegate does exactly what the people tell him to do. Now, what we found in studying this is that typically a person is a delegate until they've gone before the voters twice. And so they get elected, they do what the voters tell them to do, they get reelected and do what the voters tell them to do. Okay? So typically they go before the voters twice. That's a delegate. Now, let's take it to the next step. Next step is a trustee. A trustee is a representative who says to the voters, trust me. Trust me. I know what's going on. I know what's best. Trust me. That's a trustee. And what we find is typically after a representative has won elections 2 times, sometimes 3, but in other words, early in their career, then what happens? They start to tell the voter, I know what you want, but listen to me because I know better than you. And they don't say it in those words. Oh, no, not at all. But I've learned some things in Washington. I've learned the way that it works. I know what it's like to be in Austin representing you. So therefore, this is what I want to do. I want to be a trustee. Okay? So, there you go. A delegate and a trustee. Now, what happens is that after a representative has been a trustee for a while, guess what happens? They might lose elections because they're telling the voters, hey, sorry, I know what you want, but I know better, so I'm going to do what I want. So what happens is that they become, are you ready for this? A politico. A politico is a representative who started as a delegate, became a trustee, and then, well, they told the voters too much that they know better. And what happens is the voters nearly throw them out. Okay? So, let's say you're a trustee, you've been there for 10 terms. Okay, everybody knows who you are, and you basically listen to the people, sort of, and you go, yeah, that's right. But then you do what you want to when you're in office. Well, what happens is that the voters sometimes get mad at you, and they might vote to throw you out. If they don't vote to throw you out, you've learned your lesson, and so as a consequence, you pay more attention to the wishes of the voter. A politico is a representative who sometimes is a delegate, but also sometimes is a trustee. I mean, old habits are hard to die off, and so they'll still tell the voters sometimes, I know better. But the reality is that they are going to do what they need to do to stay in touch with the voters and represent them. Okay? So, what is a representative? You start as a delegate, you become a trustee, and then if you might lose an election, you become a politico. Now, I have seen this here. I've lived in Abilene for 25 years. I have seen this, especially with our congressional seats. Okay? And what I've seen is newly elected representatives. The very first thing they do is, I represent the voters. And they do exactly what the voters tell them to do. And then they get used to the ways of Washington and they focus on their own issues. For example, our former congressman here was a man by the name of Randy Nagelbauer. And he just got interested in his own issues. He was a banker before he got into politics. So he focused on banking issues. Nobody cares about banking issues except for a few bankers. But that was his thing. He told the voters, yeah, I know what you want, but I'm going to focus on what I think is important. Okay? And then, well, he got sick, and then there was some restlessness. The feeling was that he was not representing the voters. So he was heading in this direction. If he survived re-election, what he decided to do was retire. The new congressman who got elected to replace him is a guy named Jody Arrington. He's a congressman right now. Started out as a delegate. He's won 2 elections. And now he's very careful. He still does what the voters say. But on certain issues, rural health care, for example, he is coming from a whole different perspective. Okay? So I see him eventually be becoming more and more of a trustee. And then in time, he'll either step away from the job or someone is going to challenge him and he might lose. Okay? So here we go. These are the 3 steps in it. And I want to leave you with a last question. Okay? So you understand democracy and indirect and direct democracy. You understand what a republic is. Republic is a representative democracy. The Constitution requires that all states have a republic form of government, a republican form of government, meaning they have to have representative democracy. And you understand these 3 stages of being a representative. One final question, and I'm just going to leave the question. Can a woman represent a man? Can a man represent a woman? Can someone who's white represent someone who's black? Can someone who's Hispanic represent someone who's white? Can someone who's Latino represent someone who's black? Can someone who's black represent someone who's Asian? Can someone who is gay represent someone who is straight? Okay? I assume your first answer to this is going to be, yeah, of course. Of course. That's the way it is. Of course we can. Anybody can. You're going to have to excuse me. This is my